Welcome YouTubers and fellow gamers to King's Court. Today I'm doing a review of BattleTech. Now, for those that are not familiar with my reviews, when I do a full review, I actually account for certain criteria. And in this case, I'm talking about gameplay, difficulty, design features, stability, story, and replay value. I found those to be kind of the key elements that I would review of a game and then kind of rate them individually on certain things to like give an example. When I talk about difficulty, the question is what range can it get? Like, can it get really hard and can it go really easy? Having both, that's kind of important when you're trying to handle the situation where not everyone is at certain levels. So without further ado, I did want to make sure that I note to anyone that's listening to this right now that I did spend quite a bit of time. I have actually not beaten the game yet, but I did feel I had enough quality time to identify that what are the key things and how well this is going. So you'll see here I'm just showing that yes, I put in 74 hours to this game. It's just to say how much there really is. So while I'm going through this, I'm going to have stuff going, like videos going on in the background, so that you can kind of see what the game is like and see some of the stuff that I'm kind of talking about. So I'm going to get right into it. We're going to talk about gameplay. So of gameplay, my first question is it fun? And actually, I did find it has a lot of fun moments. Sometimes, though, it can feel a little boring because it kind of gets repetitive. And you'll see here, like, for example, when you drop in, it just starts out, it tells you kind of like what your overall goal is. You'll see it tells you the items of what you're trying to do over in the far left there. And you'll see that just moving. There's no actual engagement because the initial part, there's no actual engagement. You're actually trying to move to a certain area. You want to kind of spread your guys out, make sure that you're covering some territory, and that way you try to find the enemy, and then hopefully you do recon that way, and then you get into combat from there. Now, because this is BattleTech, and because of how BattleTech really kind of works when you talk about mercenaries and being part of a Lance unit, this is kind of the typical model. So, like I said, it does get kind of repetitive. Is it still fun? Absolutely. It does have a lot of interesting elements, and I'll get into that to why that stays that way. So that part I actually rated it at 4. Now, by the way, for my ratings, I go to a rating scale of 1 to 5. 3 says it's at average. 4 says it's actually a step above. It's what I would say is doing a little better. 5 means it's really good. If it either very strongly in what it's supposed to be trying to do, or is really good in comparison to other games. So the other part for gameplay, as I said, does it fit its style well? So like the style here is a strategy turn-based kind of thing, where they also are really focused on it being part of the tabletop, right? So there is a tabletop pen and paper version with dice for BattleTech. So that's their whole thing, trying to make it that way. And I actually give it a 5. It is to the T as they described. They really have transformed the pen and paper game into a worthwhile game on the PC. Then we have, is the play balanced? So balance is kind of important, especially when you're going through these things. So it's like, are you going to run into things that are just overpowered? Is it going to be a scenario where I can't really compete? I can't figure out ways to, like defeat the enemies, stuff like that. Now, the missions and stuff like that, storyline, they do have challenges and difficulty rate, like settings and stuff like that, kind of impact on how much that feeling can come across. But the game is actually very well balanced. What you see your enemies doing, what you can do, is very similar. As you're gaining experience and your mechs, or I'm sorry, your mech warriors are becoming more experienced, they'll get more skills. But that's not to say that when you go against opponents, they won't have similar skills or similar levels. And I'm quotating here because it's not really levels, but you do gain experience and then you start unlocking points, right? So in that, I actually say that they have a 5. And is the game linear focused, or what I call kind of like a tree focused? Now, when you say linear, it's just, hey, I got one path. That's really it. When I say the tree focus, it means honestly, there's branches all in certain different directions, and sometimes they come back, and sometimes they don't, right? Like sometimes it's just like, hey, I went through this sub mission or side mission, and eventually it's just over, right? But then the main line, the trunk, right, of the tree is the linear path, which is the main storyline. So this one is actually very tree focused. I actually emphasize that being a very pro scenario. Some games are designed to be just linear. That's really how they really work. But honestly, if you want a lot of let's say quality in your game and the ability to see different scenarios and things like that, run into different things and kind of develop a different experience, having that tree kind of build is really important. So this game does have it. So I gave it a 4 on that. I felt like they do have variety of missions and side missions, but it's been kind of interesting to see a lot more variety in those things, and maybe things that kind of help impact crew, and even build up like some side stories to certain let's say nations, right? Because they, like in their universe, there's a control zone of like this empire, that kingdom, so on and so forth in space. So like I said, I gave that one a 4 overall. And then, does the game feel immersive? Now, sadly though, like this style of game, it's really hard to feel immersed, right? Because I mean, I'm outside of it. I'm kind of commanding from over sky, orbital kind of stuff or something. It's not really that kind of immersive. But what I do consider is they did a good job in the ways of involving stuff with your mech warriors. So like there's storyline aspects to the mech warriors. There's events that can occur with your mech warriors. The fact that each one has different skills, and then you can kind of put them in certain mechs and kind of specialize them. So like for example, my guy Decker there, he's really good in the Griffin. He's able to maneuver around a lot. He's able to sense people, and he gets like super evasive bonuses and stuff like that. So. And I spec'd him for that, and he's just good for that. So like, it kind of gives me some immersion with that. The storyline is actually the best part of the immersion. So that one I actually gave it a 3.5. It would be really nice if they could find ways to build that immersion. It's just hard to do so in the game. So overall gameplay rating comes out to about a 4.3, which means it's still it's really good. It's really good. Now difficulty is it's a bigger topic because there is a whole aspect to it. It's, do you get really hard? Does it get really easy? So that's the first part. How hard can it get? There's actually custom campaign options that you can set that makes this stuff brutal. Like you can't save. Someone cores out your mech. That mech is gone. You don't even get the option to repair it. It's just trash. By the way, it also kills your pilot no matter what. So like, it can get to a point where like you're just gonna have to constantly pull in more mech warrior pilots, and then replace all sorts of mechs. You can even make it to where like the salvaging options and stuff like that are really rough. So like it requires like, hey, I need 7 salvage pieces to make one mech, but plus on top of that I reduce the amount of salvage parts that you get. So you gotta like really deal with probably only getting like one every fight, right? And that stuff can make it very difficult. To me, that's really good that they have that option. It's for those who want to be really hardcore about the game. So I gave it a 5. As for how easy it gets, you have to customize, and even then they have certain limitations on how easy it actually goes. So for those who are not really good with the mechanics, or don't understand mechanics, or have no clue of the mechanics, if you go into this and you're like, you weren't even trying to do a custom, right? Because usually when you see custom, it's more to set hard, right? Not set easy. They have like basically, here's the normal option and here's custom. If you go into normal, that's actually set at a difficult level. And I mean like, let's say not so easy, right? Or a little hard. Now, me personally, knowing all the mechanics, that was actually great. I loved it. It was awesome. It played out very well. But if you were looking for an easier experience, I must advise, please go into the custom settings, turn it on to easy, maybe turn down some of the stuff, and that'll make it a lot easier for you. So because of that, I gave them a 3. So it's not so easily identifiable. So I put the options as kind of on par with other games. What is the frustration level? Well, to be honest, while I was going through this, there wasn't a lot of frustration. Some things were frustrating, right? And it was more like, the turn of events of like, hey, I'm, shooting at a target and I just have a lot of stuff miss. Or it was like, I blew off this guy's arm and I'm like, I should be able to knock right into his torso and hopefully kill him. and it was just like, oh no, you're just gonna hit all legs for some reason. Stuff like that gets frustrating, but overall, like in the game, it just wasn't really there. I didn't get very upset with the game. I never was like, I just can't handle this or anything like that. So I give it a 4 in that component. And then system mechanic complexity level. Now this is like a pro and a con kind of thing, right? So if you're looking for a game where there's just not a lot of mechanics, this is not the game that you're looking for. There are a lot of mechanics. Now I enjoy that. I like that there's a lot of different mechanics, and when I talk about difficulty, it's kind of important because the more mechanics there are. For example, in this match or this mission, the area is actually cold, which helps out with heat. So I can actually pump out more weaponry in the fight, and bear that in mind, right? So that way I know, okay, hey, I can pump out more weaponry and manage my heat a little better. At the same time, like, hey, if I am generating too much heat, I need to make sure that I try to restrain myself on how much firing or jumping and stuff like that. And by the way, like, that's some of the mechanics. Is like, if I were to jump, that actually costs extra heat. If I fire all my each weapon individually, it has a different heat multiplier that it adds on. Eventually, when you reach so much heat, your mech can actually just basically go supernova and it dies. So it has a lot of these mechanics. There's different ranges on what can fire, like very long, short, average. Based on those ranges, they have a minimum and a maximum. And you'll see there where it's showing like a cone effect. That actually cone is trying to show you like where my minimum was. If I'm inside my minimum, I can't actually even fire at a person that close. Whereas as long as it was in the rest, and the weapon is capable, my multiplier for hitting is all the same. But if it actually had a different range where it starts dropping off, there are different multipliers. So there's a lot of mechanics to this. So the catch to this, though, is that some mechanics are in pretty good detail. So you'll see like what's the damage. They'll show you the range stuff, and it kind of helps you. You'll see like, oh, okay, if I'm pointing in a certain direction, it tells you like, hey, I'm going to have fortification by a tree, and I got an evasion marker, and all those things. It kind of tells you those parts, but what it doesn't explain to you is hit locations, how the damage rolls in. So whether damage from like the arm to the shoulder would eventually roll into the torso, and if you core out a torso, that person's gone, they're dead. The same thing goes for like knocking out both legs. That actually will make a mech worthless. You can't do anything with all the legs knocked out. So it counts as a kill technically, right? A headshot, you knock it out, that's a kill, but most people probably figure that one out anyway. So there are a lot of mechanics in it that are kind of hidden, and that's the part, that is actually the only part that I'm marking them down a little bit here. So when it comes to system mechanic complexity level and the mechanics involved, I give them a 4. And I'm not saying a 4 because, man, it's just too complex. The complexity is good, right? Having all of that. What's not good is not having anything that explains what those mechanics are. So a training session, just anything in here that would say, okay, yeah, boom, this is how you know, or particular parts. Or even showing like an indicator on the model saying, hey, when you hit here, it rolls, like if it destroys here, it rolls into here. If it destroys there, it rolls into the next part. So on and so forth. So not having those, that's where I kind of knocked it down. But altogether, right, that still gives it a difficulty overall rating of 4. So it's still doing really good. Now, let's get into design and features, right? So design and features is kind of a difficult one to talk about because there's all sorts of things to really, include or consider. And the way I look at it is some of the items that I was able to pull out was, are the mechanics balanced? And as I said before, yes, they really are. So there's a large uniqueness to a lot of different options. But even of those options, it actually balances out because everything is still available on either side. So whether it be good guy or bad guy. So that I gave it a 5. Are the graphics good? Now, some people have complained about the graphics because I guess they wanted to see really awesome graphics. But when I consider this in relation to, like, let's say, Total War or something like that, and I'm looking at the lay of the land, and I'm also considering that these guys started from scratch. They don't have a huge engine that was already developed or been in deployment for like ever. So I'm looking at the trees, and I'm like, based on the size of the mechs and the details, like, honestly, it's not bad. It really is not bad. Now, mind you, I do have it on Ultra. I don't know if it looks really crappy on other ones, but when I consider graphics, I consider it at the highest settings. Does it look good? And and to me, I do believe it does. So I gave it a 4.5. I think it could be better. There could be a lot more details rendered onto the mechs themselves, allowing you to get kind of in there. But as you can see, like even the shots, they look pretty. When you see the explosions, it looks good. The tree details are there. You know, like maybe the rocks or mountains could look a little more defined. But it's just, it's not, to me, there's not stuff here that I feel is really missing where I'm like, these graphics sucked, guys. Like, no, it's good. So I go for 4.5. Now, with the game, music is also kind of important. So having music in the game and well-designed music is really kind of a key thing that helps delivery of a game. Because of that, so what I'm saying here is this game actually had very good music overall, right? Like you always have constant music kind of playing here and there in different parts, and they're actually like mood setting. It actually works really well for the style of the game. Now, that said, though, there are key moments like in combat. Like if I nailed someone with a headshot, I would actually like to hear a change in music, something to rev it up. Like, dude, get stoked, man! You just headshot someone, you killed them. And by the way, when you do that, you get all the parts of that mech. That's gonna actually all be salvageable. That's great, right? Or like, you know, one of your own Mechwarriors is heavily damaged. Well, let's start getting dramatic on that music, right? Things are getting rough. People might start dying. There's reasons to be scared. Let's play some, you know, hyped up scary music, right? They didn't do that. They don't have variation in music, but the music that they had was really good. So I give it 4. If you actually had music that would vary based on what's going on, that to me actually helps with some of that immersion and develops some extra impact of the game. So, level of game interactive items. So this is, like, not all games really have it or are designed for it. This game really doesn't have too much that you would kind of expect. But honestly, having different interactive items like in the field would be kind of cool. So like some missions actually allow you to have interactive items that are like explosives. Not really that they actually you touch them or anything or interact with it. It's that you can destroy them and they do certain things. Those are the kind of things like it would be really nice, but also have it like where you have other options like maybe spin up defensive turrets to support your team. Like if you had like some kind of weird engineer group or something. It'd just be random things. It's not really to say that this is a broken thing in the game, but it would be cool to have that stuff. And you'll see here, like they got the debrief, and it tells you like here's what overall came, and in this case, I was actually going for all salvageable parts. So you'll see I didn't really get any money in it. And then they actually go and allow you to like do salvage and things like that. So for that, I actually just give it a 3. I say it's on par when it comes to interactive. Is it pay to win? This game is not. It just doesn't have any of that. And in-game purchases, the same thing. There's no real in-game purchases, so that I gave them 5s on both of that. Comes out to a 4.4 on the overall rating and design. So here you'll see now I'm able to pick out salvage. This is like one of the things I thought was cool. Is you contract to say how much salvage you want. And if you actually noticed, in that fight, I actually headshot the Thunderbolt and killed the pilot. And because I headshot him and knocked out the head, the whole mech is still there. So you'll see I was actually able to pull all 3 components or parts. And that's one of the things I was mentioning about difficulties. You can change that to be like where I would need 7 parts to actually build the mech, which is kind of crazy. You're saying like, hey, one part's the arm, one part's the leg, one part, and so on and so forth. This is like you have the whole left torso, the right torso, and center, and there you go. You have a mech. And you'll see, like, I'm looking through all these different things and kind of evaluating. That's the stuff. It'll give you all the information. It'll tell you what they are. So definitely got some cool features and details for that. Now, stability. Stability is kind of a big thing now, and it's one of the reasons why I have it out here in rating, because when games come out, they're not as expected, right? So, like, servers go out, there's lag, all sorts of problems. So to that point, right? Like one of the things is, did the servers work on release? And it turned out they actually had a little speed bump when they released, where they had some problems with connectivities. It was something to do with Steam. It took them about an hour or 2, and they got it fixed. So it wasn't that big of a deal. It was definitely still absolutely playable for the game. People were still getting onto it, but it was just like the downloads and stuff like that were kind of problematic. So in that case, I gave them a 4. But the next question comes is, was it stable after like the first week? So it's one thing if you have the initial first couple days, but if after a week you're still having problems, that's a bigger deal. to be honest. That's pretty impactful. In their case, they had no issues after that. After that first like little hiccup, that was it. So everything was good for the server side and getting the game and playing the game, even playing it online, not a big deal. So all of that I gave it a 5. Did the game have a lot of bugs, right? That's another one that kind of comes up because, I mean, honestly, like personal PC and stuff, it can vary based on everyone's individual PC, so please bear that in mind. But when I ran it, like when I was doing this, I didn't really run into a lot of conflicts. Every once in a while, I have it where like the left click in placement where I'm trying to turn or rotate my guy. It didn't really do it the right way. Sometimes, right? It was very minute times that it happened, so I don't really count it as a big problem. It's really hard to point out when it was too. So that case, I give it a 4, right? So just because I ran into some, nothing really. When it comes to match loading, so I have like match loading issues. In this case, it's like the missions and things like that. Loading's actually never been a problem. I never had a problem at all. So I give them a 5 for that. And then system crashes, right? There's a case that, you know what, the game just locks up or whatever, has some kind of conflict with whatever reason. I don't even know what, like you could be doing anything on the side. And I consider all that potentially impactful to your gameplay. I didn't have anything like that, not a single crash. So I give them a 5 there. So overall rating and stability actually was a 4.6. They did really good on the release of this game. So, and that is actually something I want to point out. It is a nice component that you just don't always get anymore. There are so many games that come out and it's just trash when it starts, and then you gotta wait like 3 or 4 days before they stabilize it or something, you know. Story is a big one. Right, story is a big component to me. Not all games are developed with story. They're more competitive. In this kind of game, it is definitely story focused, as you can see. I'm going through a lot of different things. And you'll see here's more components of interactive models that they have. So like you have where you're doing upgrades, you need money for that. You know, it takes time and, you know, effort, all that kind of stuff. And it has benefits. It helps make other things happen, like, you know, better for you. So like, you know, build like repairing your mechs, being able to store more mechs, just all sorts of stuff. So in story, the things that I kind of go for here, and I'm going to just walk through some of those questions. So it's, does the story grab your attention? And to me, yes, it did. The main story really does. I feel like they can give a little extra oomph to it, but honestly, it does really kind of, it has a good hold strong and or strong hold on it, and it does make it kind of impactful, right? So it does have a story that means something to you. So I gave it a 4.5. Was their emotional stock in the story? So this is, you know, when they have this story, when they're talking about stuff, do you actually feel like, I'm really involved? Like, yeah, I want them to win. I want to, it's important. And actually, yes, their story absolutely drove that home all the way through. It made sense for your character and the things that you're doing. Everything that comes up to it, even the choices that you make, it totally suits it. So I gave them a 5. Did it include humor? I felt like sometimes it did. But it wasn't always a lot of humor. So it was more like, you know, kind of people who understand BattleTech kind of humor and things like that. But it wasn't always like, oh man, it was just, you know, overall funny. There was a lot of jokes. So I gave them a 3.5 on that. Did it include drama? So like, here's actually a case of some of the events that can occur. So as you're going through, you'll get this event and you got to read it. So that's one of the things I wish you kind of had audio stuff or, you know, anything like that. But I totally understand. So they read it and you have to make certain choices, right? So like, here's a case by example, right? Maybe drama. I might have to either just say, you know what, I'm gonna delete the message, or I go talk to Behemoth about, you know, this history that this other guy says that she has, or I can even just fire her. Right? You know, I mean, that's kind of drama, right? Like, hey, yo, get off my ship. Some captain told me that, you know, you used to be a punk. Like, well, okay, great. So the fact that they had this, the storyline itself had drama. The side stuff has drama. Altogether, I was like, yeah, it's very good. Like, there's a lot of stuff to it, and it actually has impactful things that can happen. So in this one, you'll see, based on me talking to her, nothing actually happened. No lasting consequences. But some of them will be like, hey, you know what? They're in low spirits, or you know what? They suffered experience drops or something like that, right? Some of them they gain experience, right? So very cool stuff. I give it a 5 for that. Does it include action? Well, I mean, the whole game's basically based on action, but if I want to compare the level of action to other games, it's still not there, right? I mean, it's a turn-based strategy, so it makes it a little difficult, but I do say of turn-based in comparison, it's a cut above, so I give them a 4. Does the story have a lesson? So this is like, overall, you know, if you were to look at a big picture, was there a main driving lesson in the story? I don't feel like the story's lesson in here, besides like, you know, hey, someone getting screwed and you trying to make things better. I don't feel like it really drove home on that factor. Now, again, a lot of games aren't really doing that as much anymore. I do find this to be kind of an important feature. But because it did have a moral focus of, you know, trying to be good, I did give it a 3.5. Was there any educational elements? There is good use of math, tactical awareness, and map reading, but that's really about it when it comes to the game. So it's pretty typical for most levels of games anymore. And you'll see here like what's going on in the background. This is kind of the story stuff. This is all the stuff that drives the story. So besides the combat that you saw earlier, this is really where it delivers the story. You have these scenarios where they're talking, and then there's responses that you can do, and based on those responses, they give you other responses, all towards this main storyline aspect, right? So the educational elements, I actually say is a 3. Did the story feel long? Well, I mean, the story doesn't feel long. Like as I'm going through it, really doesn't. Now, I put in a lot of extra time based on doing all the side missions because I really like going out there and killing mechs and, you know, making money because, you know, I'm a mech warrior, man. Guys got to get paid, you know. I got to feed people. I'm running a ship. So here you go. Like, and as you saw like earlier, I had like 13 million. I mean, I could buy a mech for like 6 million or 5 million. I'm still just going around scrounging and doing missions and making people happy, you know, that they favor me, and then they pay me even more because I'm cool, right? Because they're like, oh man, this guy always delivers. So I always get kind of caught up in the tree stuff where I'm doing all the branches, right? That's just how I am. So I have a lot of extra hours in there, but I do see the game is honestly, it's probably about like 30 hours is really what I consider for the storyline. But it didn't really feel long. If I'm doing the story was very impactful, very fun, very interesting, and it just did not feel long at all. So that part I give it a 4.5. Was the story longer than 30 hours? So yeah, I mean it's easily at least 30. So I give them a 5 there. To me, anymore, if you're paying $50, $60, you should at least have 30 hours a game right there. If you don't get 30 hours for that, if you're not at least getting like what $2 an hour for your video game, that's pretty rough, right? Now, for example, I'm already up to like 75, right? Which means I'm paying less than $1 per hour that I'm playing the game. That's awesome, right? But that wasn't story driven, right? And to me, the very core, if I were the kind of person who's like, I'm not doing anything, I just want story, I just want to finish this game, I'm done. Did I get my money's worth? So that's where I'm looking at. If that's really how you are, then, you know, at least $2, right, towards it. There you go. So, did the story boost immersion? So this is where, you know, did the story help try to get you involved or feel like I'm really part of this? If you are referencing yourself as your main character, I would say yes, it really does. But it definitely could have a lot more immersion with the warriors, you know, and involvement, having it where, you know, like the morality stuff, like in different effects, right? Even training and things like that. There could be all sorts of different ways to help boost immersion in it, even like simulations and emulators and stuff like that, because of the timeline, right? And the things that go on in that story. So it'd be really nice if they did up that, but I felt like it was a little bit better than I would have expected, so I gave them a 3.5 overall. Or a 3.5 for that. So that gives the story rating overall a 4.15. And then my last element is replay value. Now, replay value for some people, it's not important, right? So if it's not important to you, don't really worry about this part. Please enjoy the videos that are in the background here, because this is kind of going into the story stuff. So you'll see they do have cinematics, right? And again, to the graphics and stuff like that, the cinematics, they went through a different style, but it's still nice. It still looks nice. I really appreciate it from the BattleTech side of things, and it sticks to the kind of stuff I would have expected from them. So really nice overall. So please enjoy that video if you're watching there in the background. So for replay value, I add particular questions like, are there different classes to play? So yes, you kind of build your own classes where people specialize in certain things, but it's not really that there's a lot of different classes where you would have replay value in the aspect of going back and changing or doing different things. You honestly would just pick up new crew members and specialize them in the same storyline. So Not really. That I actually say it's a step below, so I gave them a 2 for that. Did the story allow for different endings? Now, as I said, I didn't actually finish it yet, but from what I've seen, I don't think so. There's no actual different changes based on what you're doing to be like, oh yeah, you went down option A, so you'll get ending A, or you went down option B, now you're gonna get, you know, ending B or C, depending on option C on, or I'm sorry, option D on B, right? So on and so forth. So that one I give it a 1. I feel like it really kind of sucks that it wasn't any other ending possibilities. Is the game fun to where you want to play it again? This I actually can see. I can see there being a lot. There is just a lot of fun when you're playing it, getting the other mechs. Whether it could be that this is more of the aspect of continuing to play after the story is done, or really just restarting and doing higher difficulties and stuff like that to make it more challenging or competitive for yourself. So I can see that being actually a case. So that I actually gave it a 4. Now, I rate based on, is it survival based? So this is kind of survival in the sense that, you know, hey, if you die or if characters die, they're gone. You can have it where you lose mechs, and that kind of builds into that whole structure, like, well, you kind of always have to rebuild up a little bit, and they have the options to allow that too, right? So like that's why all those side missions are available and they keep coming up, right? So that way, if you were doing the harder difficulties, it's not impossible, right? It doesn't become too crazy. It's still entirely capable. But since it's not really a survival based game where you have like structure building, you know, re-educating your research and learning to build all these things, and that you die and it's immediately complete wipe, right? What I would consider is why can't I think roguelike? So it's not roguelike. So that I give it a no, but it's the base of the game is not really meant for that. So I just gave the rating a 3, right? To say, okay, on par, right? It's not special in any way, shape, or form for that. Are there other modes available? So there is career option, right? I didn't actually get to look into career option yet, but I believe it's, excuse me, you kind of start as more mission or like harder mission oriented in doing your own career to say like how good you are. And then there's the online play where you actually go competitive against other people. So that definitely gives you other options, and that actually does boost the replay value, because now that you've beaten the story and done that, you now have other options of things to do after you've beaten it, kind of like end game aspects, right? That's how I'm relating that. So that I actually give them a 4. I don't consider it like exceptionally like, oh man, look at all these great things that you can do and stuff like that, but there are definitely other modes and options. I'm hoping to see more modes and options come out. I do know that they have expansions that are planned, so absolutely probably something you can see. So that comes out to a 3.5. When you actually balance all of that out, you're looking at really a strong 4.2, right? So to end this, right, the question comes up: is this game worth it, right? Absolutely, this is a wonderful game. Like when it comes down to the review, like, and I'm not kidding, I'm listing these. I'm actually a little critical to a point, but I'm not going to be so critical. So just bear that in mind. I'm looking at this as like your average Joe kind of player who's just looking to have a good time. So if I were to give any kinds of heads up to this game, what I would mention is that the mechanics in BattleTech are very strongly implemented into this game. And they're not easily identified or told. So I am going to be making some videos to try to help explain some of those hidden mechanics as a way to, you know, help people when they are playing it, to hopefully reduce some frustrations that can occur. But I mean, if you are into the tactical, turn-based, overhead strategy kind of games, this is a wonderful, wonderful game for it. If you are into ballistics and kind of like military warfare stuff, again, wonderful game. Storyline's interesting, but if you were looking for a massive story, not really your cup of tea. So I will point that out. If you're looking for action-paced or like first-person shooter, again, not the cup of tea. There is another game that they have that's coming out that's going to be Mechwarrior 5, Mercenaries, right? That's definitely the first-person shooter. That's the one that you would be looking for if that's really the kind of player you are. So definitely worth the time, definitely worth overall. Very good game. Thank you so much to Harebrained Schemes developing this, and thank you to the BattleTech series. Hope you like this. Like, subscribe. See you next time.